another moment. I want to live intentionally in light of eternity. I want to love like you loved. I want to love with my life.
In the dark night, I was wondering, and then you called my name, and I came running. You took my shame, and you set my feet to dancing. Now I'm forever yours, and you are mine now. Running wild, throwing chains off in freedom. Lord, you have saved us, free to shout out your name and your glory. All for you, Jesus. Running wild in your freedom. Living in your light, by your spirit. And now I know your voice, oh, I can feel it. You lead me on, and you set my feet to dancing. Now I'm forever yours, and you are mine now. Running wild, throwing chains off in freedom. Lord, you saved us, free to shout out your name and your glory. For you, Jesus, Jesus. Running wild, throwing chains off in freedom. Lord, you saved us, free to shout out your name and your glory. For you, Jesus. Running wild in your freedom. Nothing to hide, your love alive in us, we shout it out. We are free now, nothing to fear, when you're here with us. Nothing to hide, your love alive in us, we shout it out. We are free now, nothing to fear, when you're here with us. Running wild, throwing chains off in freedom. Lord, you have saved us, free to shout out your name and your glory. All for you, Jesus, Jesus. Running wild, throwing chains off in freedom. Lord, you have saved us.
That awkward moment when the countdown goes off and no one gets up to talk. You guys feeling good? Good. Hey, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a great time. I'm not in charge of this. I just decided to get up and love you guys for a moment. I actually have nothing to share, and that's a great day. Love it, not having responsibility at a meeting. But you guys are all considering on going on project, and that's a really big deal, and it's going to be really great. I'm also not in charge of that at the moment, but it's going to be so awesome that even I'm going to go. So glad you guys are considering it, and all of the above. So when the people who are in charge get here, we'll start. Okay, bye.
Grace is all sufficient, it's an all sufficient grace.
Hello. What's up, guys? Welcome to Chi Alpha. Excited for you guys to be here tonight. If you guys could turn with me to Romans chapter 7. I'm just kidding. I wish. You guys feeling good? Cool. Excited to be together. Excited to talk a little bit about support raising training. I'm going to go ahead and use this microphone, although it's just us and it could be very personal without it, because we're recording this onto YouTube for anyone who may just absolutely couldn't be here during this time tonight, or someone who decides to go on project, in the next couple weeks, and they weren't here. They can go back and listen to this because it's really vital to project, super important aspect of it, obviously. So thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time on a Sunday night. I know that it is late, and so I'll get through all of this as efficiently as I can without missing anything that's incredibly valuable for you guys, time-wise. So I want to just take a moment and pray just over this time and just over the trip, so you guys join me in that. Jesus, we love you, and I'm really, really thankful for what you've been speaking to us already tonight, what you're already doing in our lives, and the life that your word gives, even when it challenges us, the life that it brings, and I just pray that tonight's word from Galatians would continue to rest on our hearts and in our minds, continue to bring encouragement and challenge and correction where needed to us. And Jesus, would you help us each individually to see where you would have us to respond to what you've spoken to us tonight. And God, I pray over Project, pray that it would be impactful for my life, that it would be impactful for our lives, that we would come out of the week with a greater heart to see you known among the nations, from right here where we stand to the ends of the earth, Jesus, that you would break our heart for what breaks yours, that as we know that it is your will, we see in 2 Peter that none would perish, but that all would come to repentance, so you're patient with us. You're patient with the world, not willing that any would perish, but that all would get opportunity to hear the gospel and to respond to it. Jesus, help us to carry your gospel faithfully where we are and globally. And so, God, just grow our hearts for the lost globally through this trip and really every day. Jesus, would you help us to be those who love the process, who are not just waiting on an end result, but are finding joy and value in the process. And part of the process when it comes to living a missional life, for those who do it vocationally, is support raising, is partnering with others to see the Great Commission fulfilled here, there, and everywhere. And so help us, Jesus, those of us who do it long term, those of us who will do it for this trip, and it'll be the only time we do it in our lives, help us to learn what you would want us to learn in this process, and to be a part of it, and to be where we are in every moment, and to see it as an opportunity to cast vision for the lost globally, by letting other people be a part of sending us on Virtual Project. So we love you, God. I'm grateful. Amen. So you guys are at Support Raising Training for Virtual Project 222. Hope you're excited. I am incredibly excited about Virtual Project. Just to be super transparent with you guys, when all of the idea came out, when COVID happened and airplanes shut down and travel globally shut down, and there's lots of places, I even looked into it this last week, like if I could take a trip to Zambia between now and when my baby boy was born, and like just still there's so many restrictions, so many, you have to quarantine, you have to test, you have to quarantine again. There's like lots of things depending on which country you're going to. And basically, State Department, I guess the travel agencies that may be are still saying, it's not a great place to travel. And I know that it's like that pretty much everywhere it's still difficult to travel. So when all that got shut down, I said all that just to say our hearts are really broken. And honestly, from throughout COVID, in the beginning stages of it all, I really went through a season of grieving, and I didn't even know what was happening until I looked up months later, and I'm like, man, every day I'm sad, and I don't know why I'm sad. And as I processed through it and talked with our team about it and went before the Lord with it, what I come to realize is that I was really broken from the things that COVID had stole from me. And one of the greatest of those things was Project last year with you guys. And we had done a lot of preparation to take 4 trips to 5 countries, and there were around 40 of us going on that trip. I know many of you guys were planning to go. And honestly, it broke me even worse than probably I realized, that I couldn't go with you guys for all that God was going to do, and just that what we were missing out on, and that literally we had no control over it. And so in the early stages after that, there was a lot of talk about these virtual trips and the value of them, and hey, we can connect with missionaries through Zoom, and we can have these experiences where we're at, and just to be totally forward, I didn't see a lot of value in it, but and I thought that honestly you guys would go on the virtual trip and you'd use it as an excuse not to do it for real. And that really bothered my heart, and I didn't want that to be the case. But as I talked to people who have done these trips and people that are overseeing the building of these virtual trips, what I've actually found out is the opposite is happening, that people are going on these virtual trips and their heart's growing for India, and it's growing for the Arab world, and it's growing for the nations of the world, and it's actually building anticipation for the moment that we can go again. And so that's what I'm really trusting will happen for us as a community, that this will be a moment of really growing our heart for the nations and helping us. It's okay, it's fine. I saw your face go straight to embarrassment. Seriously, no worries. So that it would really grow our hearts, and that we would be anticipating the moment that we could go again, right? And we'd be planning toward that day. And so we want to continue to build momentum. So for us, man, Project is such a big part of our community. And some of you guys, I even think of like Laura Lee, and some of you guys who have been around now for 1.5 years to 2 years, you haven't even gotten to be a part of any of what is missions for us, except for on campus. You haven't got to be a part of spring break trips. You haven't got to be a part of overseas trips. And that's such a massive part of who we are. It's kind of like being a part of a family and never going to Christmas with the family. It's like you're still a part of the family, but you miss this huge component of what the family does. And Christmas for us is probably one of the biggest parts of the year that we are with our family, and that's a lot like what you're missing in Missing Project. And so we want to do our best to simulate that for you. And even as I was saying earlier, we want it to be excellent. If this was going to be just something thrown together and just something to do for the sake of doing it, I wouldn't do it. It would be a waste of all of our times. And so we are working pretty much daily now to make these trips as much like the real thing as we can possibly make them and still be here. So I hope that encourages you guys, that you've been around Chi Alpha enough that you see that we're going to try to do everything with excellence. And so this will be no exception to that. And hopefully it'll be challenging and encouraging for you guys. So wanted to give you some background thoughts. So with all that said, a massive part of who we are is these project trips, but with the idea that when we go on these trips and you're exposed to the lostness of the world, our heart is that many of you would be praying about doing this with your life, giving your life to missions, and all of you, we understand, won't. And things from these trips can equip you to make disciples in the marketplace or wherever you end up. But we're hoping also that many of you will give up your life and go into all the world and make disciples. And so what we've learned is that exposure to the nations is what draws our heart to the nations. Exposure to the need is what helps us to recognize, hey, this is something that the Lord may be wanting me to do. And so with that, with these trips, what we're trying to do is simulate for you guys as much as possible what it is like to live life as a missionary globally. And so a massive part of being a missionary is raising support, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in just a second. But so I want to give you just kind of 3 ideas of why we're raising support for Virtual Project. It's not a normal project trip. We're not going overseas. Hopefully we will get opportunities to share the gospel, though, where we are and with the people that we are interacting with. But it won't be a normal project trip, so you may be thinking it's not that much money, why can't I just pay for it? And so I want you guys to understand a few reasons why. So since project is about getting long-term workers on the ground, a big part of that is raising funds. The reason being is when we send workers to these places globally, the reason that they raise support to go is the alternative is they have to get a 9-to-5 job in whatever one of these countries are, which is, one, extremely difficult, but second, if they get a 9-to-5 job, they're losing 9 to 5 for making disciples intentionally in the village or in the city that they're in. And so raising support basically allows them the freedom to share the gospel all day, every day. And so what you'll find is where you find missionaries is places where the people that they're sharing to either can't afford to pay them. Example, us that are on the staff team here. The reason that we're missionaries is because the people that we feel called to reach aren't going to finance us to be here. And so in order for us to spend every week 24/7 with you guys, people finance us to be here so that we don't have to work at McDonald's and then also try to lead this community. Does that make sense? Well, if you think of it in a foreign context, put yourself in Hong Kong, right? We don't want someone to have to go to Hong Kong and work a 9-to-5 or an 8-to-4 job because we want them making disciples 8-to-4 or 9-to-5. So it's worth a sacrifice of my finances here to send a couple to Hong Kong, China that can just focus on simply sharing the gospel. They have no financial need. They have no financial obligation because we as the church come around them and send them so that they can focus on the unreached people that are there for the gospel. Does that make sense? So where you find missionaries, what you'll find is they're reaching out to a group of people who either can't pay them and finance them to pastor them, to shepherd them, to disciple them, or they don't know that they need them to be there. So the people in Muscat, Oman, for instance, a country that's like 99-something% Muslim, they're not going to pay Song to come be a missionary there. They don't even want him there. They don't know that they need the gospel that he carries, so they're not going to finance it. But we know they need it, so we would be willing to finance it. Does that make sense? And so where you find missionaries, you're going to find one of these two scenarios happening. And so missionaries support Raise, and we're trying to simulate as much for you guys as possible what one of these trips would really be like, but also what the life of a missionary would really be like, so that you guys can kind of get a taste of it. And so I asked some friends of ours who are in, I'm blanking on the name where Janelle in, Kyrgyzstan. I asked our friend Janelle to share some of support raising, the process, why it matters to her, and then we also asked Zach and Callie to share with us, and many of you guys know them, and they're in the Arab world, and they're from our community. So I'm going to show you guys two videos from some global workers who want to share with you guys about why support raising is important or valuable, why it matters in their lives. So you're going to hear from these guys. Hey, will you play the Janelle one first? Thanks.
Hi friends, my name is Janelle Nesbitt. My husband Evan and I serve in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan on a Live Dead launch team. We serve in a place where there are very, very few believers. It's a predominantly Muslim religion, and we intentionally serve in a place where there is no church to plant the church. And Tyler had reached out to me just to ask if I would talk a little bit about support raising and our journey. We've now done 2 terms, so we've support raised twice in the States, and man, what a joy and what a humbling experience it can be to ask people to support you, to invite people along to the journey. And I just want to encourage all of you who are in the process, maybe for the first time, maybe you've been doing it for a while. It can be incredibly challenging and incredibly rewarding. I just think about the people in our lives who they had never supported missions work before, didn't have a concept of that, but because they're a part of our team and because they see how we live pretty normal lives just in a place where there are very, very, very few Christians, they're able to partner with us And we're able to almost advocate for the unreached through their partnership. And so that's one of my favorite parts. A second thing, second just like benefit to support raising and to all that that entails is that you really give other people the opportunity to be blessed by God, for God to use them in ways that they weren't imagining before. I think about my in-laws who supported my husband when he was on staff with the Chi Alpha, and they said, like, when we began supporting you, we noticed, like, it seemed like God just really blessed our finances more than ever. Like, we were giving, but God was giving it back to us over and above. So even when he left Chi Alpha for a season and was a youth pastor, so he wasn't on support, they started picking up other people because they just saw like God provide for them in ways when they were giving generously, like God giving back to them. And then I think about, for us on the field, living on support can be challenging, but I would not have it any other way. I think about our friends in different denominations who are missionaries on the field, but who, like, different denominations send their workers in different ways. So for us with AGWM, we went around church to church, and then individual over coffee, asking people if they would join our support team. Other denominations, you apply to be workers, and then they fund you, and you don't have to do all the work of going around and asking people. And for a second, that seems appealing. You're like, oh wow, I really wish that's how we could do it. But really, like, it is so rewarding to meet with people, to cast the vision, and then to have like prayer partners and advocates who really can come alongside you and support you. On the field, there's no way that we could both work full-time jobs. We could if that's what it required, but living on support frees us to be able to spend the most time with the local people. It frees us to be able to start businesses that bless the local community instead of just working 9-to-5 jobs and trying to like disciple people in the middle of it. We're able to live on support so that we're really empowered to have the time and the resources to be able to share with people all throughout the day, to do language, to just immerse ourselves in the work here and not worry about where our income comes from. And just a few reasons why we really highly value living on support. We're so thankful for the people God's put in our lives who allow us to live on the field and to serve and work among the amazing unreached people of Central Asia.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So we're going to show you a video now of Zach and Callie, who were here with us, and now they're serving in the Arab world. And she did a really cool introduction, but this is live streaming on YouTube, so we have cut her introduction off, and this was your introduction to them. She's going to share with you and Zach now.
Yes, we know those two words, support raising, they're probably eliciting a lot of different feelings in a lot of people in that room. Some of you guys are super excited to share about what God's laid on your heart, and you're excited to see what's going to happen in the hearts of those around you. And then there are those of you who've never even thought about support raising, really have no idea what it entails and what it looks like, only that it involves asking people for money. So we know maybe in your family that's taboo or it's weird, and we know there's just a lot of different feelings. And so we're really excited for the opportunity to share about that and really address some of those issues.
I know I felt completely out of my comfort zone when I first started to support raise for Project my senior year. At first I tried to do it on my own and not ask God for his help, but I quickly realized that that wouldn't work. Once I started to seek him in the process, things became so much smoother. God gave me the confidence to ask people I never would have thought to ask. This really prepared me for being a long-term global worker because I knew from the very beginning that God had to be in control or I wouldn't get anywhere.
Yeah, what Callie says is exactly right. I feel like I realized really early on in our process how humbling support raising was and how dependent we as God's children are on his provision. And throughout the support raising process, you're consistently reminded that if God does not move on the hearts of those that you're speaking to, you're never going to fulfill what you feel like you're being called to. So it's a really humbling experience, a time full of prayer, I know for me, I bought into prayer like never before in my life, because you realize that this is your lifeline. If you know that God is a God of provision. If you pray to Him, He's going to move and He's going to bless. So I think it really taught me just a deeper dependence upon God. I think it taught me the importance of seeking His face in all things, never counting anyone out, just considering before Him who He would want me to ask, what He would want me to say, how much He would have me to ask for, involving Him in the whole process, because the support raising process really is about Him. I think I learned that it's a ministry in and of itself. It's not like this thing that we have to do to get to what we actually want to do. Like, no, it's a beautiful part of the process. It's a God-given process. It's biblical. We see consistently throughout the Bible, from the idea of the priests being supported by the people of Israel to Paul being supported in his ministry, that it is meant for workers to be supported by those in the church. And so I think I learned the importance and the beauty of it throughout it. And it's so crucial because it teaches you so much. It changes you so much. It changes those that you're talking to as they're feeling the call of God in their lives as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much, guys, for letting us share with you, and we'll see you later. Bye.
So what's really cool to me is Callie went on one of our first trips overseas and learned, she was in your shoes. She raised support to go and share the gospel of Jesus in Zambia. She did it, she made it, and now she does it for her life. And that's really cool to see someone even from our own community who's been through this process. And it's really cool to hear from these guys who live this as their life so that you can see, I'm not just making this up, and so that you can also get their perspective as well and the value of support raising. And so maybe I jumped the gun, I didn't even define support raising, but to simplify it, I think it would be this. It's that you allow people to partner with you financially so that you can fulfill the Great Commission, to free you up to fulfill the Great Commission, or to send you to fulfill the Great Commission. So I just want to quickly show you a few passages of Scripture that even back support raising. So it's not just me telling you it. It's not just these guys who are working overseas telling you it, but you can see the scriptural basis for living off support, the worker being worthy of their wage. And so I'll just read it to you guys. You can write it down and go there later. Luke 8, 1 through 3, we actually see it exemplified in Jesus' life. And there's a cool comparison or contrast we'll do between Luke 8, 1 through 3, and Matthew 17, 24 through 27. So just 6 verses. 8:1-3 says this: Soon afterward he went on, he being Jesus, through cities and villages, proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom of God. So he was proclaiming and bringing good news. He was sharing the gospel. And the 12 were with him. So it was him and it was his disciples. And also some women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities. Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's household manager, and Susanna, and many others. And so these women, their lives had been changed by Jesus. And their response to that was this. It says, and many others who provided for them out of their means. And so there's this group of women, at least in this passage, that are seemingly following Jesus and his disciples around, who are financially affluent enough to take care of all of their needs. And they're doing such. But what's really interesting, if you contrast that passage, Jesus here is living off the support of these women, right? But if you contrast that with Matthew 17, which is one of the coolest miracles Jesus does in all of Scripture, Matthew 17, 24 through 27, there's a moment basically where Jesus is being interrogated about why him and Peter don't pay their taxes. And this is what happens. It says, when they came to Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma tax went up to Peter and said, does your teacher not pay the tax? And he said, yes. And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, what do you think, Simon? From whom do kings of the earth take toll or tax? From their sons or from others? And when he had said, from others, Jesus said to him, then the sons are free. However, not to give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a hook and take the first fish that comes up. And when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for me and for yourself. And you're like, what does this obscure passage about Jesus telling Peter to go down, catch a fish, get a shekel out of its mouth, and go and pay taxes have anything to do with support raising? And this is it. Jesus could make money come out of a fish's mouth, but he still decided to let these women support his ministry. He could take a little boy's sack lunch and he could turn it into feeding 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 with ease and have 12 baskets full left over, right? But he chose to let these women out of their means support his ministry because it was valuable for them to be a part. And so why are we raising support, and what's the biblical basis for it? It's, well, Jesus did it. This is how he did it, so he could be free to do ministry. He thought it was valuable for other people to partner with him. You must also see it valuable for people to partner with you. Some people will never go into all the world. Some people will never go to Atlanta, to the places that we'll go to share Jesus. But they can go with you as they give. They can partner with us in what God will do in your life and what he will speak to you guys. I believe wholeheartedly that out of these trips, there will be students who are called to specific places at specific times. I believe that out of these trips will come students who say, hey, I don't want to go this route anymore. I feel like God's calling me to do this. And them backing it financially. By them backing it financially, they're a part of it. The difference that will eventually be made in Africa or Asia or Latin or South America or wherever it is that you end up for the gospel, they're a part of it because they got behind it financially. You're robbing from them if you don't let them be a part of it. And then we see it in the life of Jesus. We also see Paul talk about it in a few verses in 1 Corinthians 9, 1 through 14. In case the life of Jesus wasn't enough for you, we'll go to 1 Corinthians 9, and then this is the last one, just to kind of give some biblical evidence for it. 1 Corinthians 9, 1 through 14. It says, am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? Are not you my workmanship in the Lord? If to others I am not an apostle, at least I am to you, for you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. This is my defense to those who would examine me. Do we not have the right to eat and drink? He's talking about ministers of the gospel. Do we not have a right to food? Do we not have a right to beverage? Do we not have the right to eat and drink? Do we not have the right to take along a believing wife, as do the other apostles and the brothers of the Lord and Cephas? Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working for a living? Okay, so Paul is doing ministry with Barnabas, and he's writing to these people that he's doing ministry to or for about this scenario, how it works out for him financially. And he's like, look at all those others that work for the gospel. You see it as their right that they be paid by the gospel. That's what he's about to get to. He's like, why is it any different for me and Barnabas, who I travel with? Don't we have the right to refrain from working? So he's basically saying we shouldn't have to work secondary jobs. We should get our pay through the gospel. But in this particular, for instance, he was not. So then he says, who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard without eating any of its fruit, or tends a flock without getting some of the milk? Do I say these things on human authority? Does not the law say the same? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the grain. So is it for oxen that God is concerned? So basically he's saying, as you're going through the grain field, then the ox is the one that's pulling you through to do the work. Don't muzzle it. Let it eat some of the grain as it goes along. As it's working in the field, it deserves some of the grain that it's working for. Don't muzzle its mouth. Don't be selfish for the ox who's working. And so it's this illustration that as we work for the gospel, we are deserving of making a wage from the gospel. He's making this point. Does he not certainly speak for our sake? So he's not talking about the ox. He's trying to prove that the one who does his life for the gospel should also make his living from the gospel. It was written for our sake, because the plowman should plow in hope, and the thresher thresh in hope of sharing in the crop. If we have sown spiritual things among you, is it too much if we reap material things from you? If others share this rightful claim on you, do not we even more? Nevertheless, we have not made use of this right. So he says, this is how it should be. I'm simplifying it for you guys. He says, you should be paying me. You should be taking care of me so I don't have to work these other jobs so that I can give all of my time for the proclamation of the gospel. But he says, nevertheless, I've not made use of this right, but we endure anything rather than to put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. So he basically says, you guys should be doing this for us, but you are not doing this for us, and that's okay. We'll work anyways. Does that make sense? I'm not going to do anything that would serve to make an obstacle for the gospel of Christ. Do you not know that those who are employed in the temple service get their food from the temple, and those who serve at the altar share in the sacrificial offerings? In the same way, the Lord commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel. So this is the biblical basis behind support raising for a life as missionaries, right? And so, are you guys missionaries yet? No, you're not. Are you trying to make a living off of this trip? No, you're just trying to pay for some lunches and, an overnight stay and whatever, and you could probably do it yourself. But we're trying to build principles into this trip so that you can see what it's like to live as a long-term worker. And the only way to do that is to have you guys support raise for this trip just like you would for all of our project trips. Does that make sense? Everyone with me? Okay, cool. Then he concludes. Oh, no, that's it, 14. I went through it. I thought I went through 12. So this is kind of some of biblical evidence. There's much more biblical evidence, but I think that we can get enough of it by the life of Jesus and a quick glimpse at what Paul has to say, hey, this is a biblical thing. They're not making this up, and I should be on board with it. So this is support raising. This is why we're doing it for Virtual Project. This is the heart behind it. Some practical things for you guys. We're going to fly through these, then I'll get you out of here. Sound good? Okay, so here are the practical things. These are the goals. As Portia has been communicating for weeks, at least a couple weeks now, I believe if you're going on one trip, the cost of that one trip is $200. But you have to pay a $50 deposit, so that's non-refundable, so we know you're serious about going on the trip. This is so we can book basically the Airbnb that we're going to be staying in, and we know that you're serious, and we don't get one that's way too big because you filled out a form, but you weren't for real about going. Make sense? So since that's the case, and just to give you guys the full heart behind it, the reason it's $50 is because we felt like $50 would be enough that it actually hurt a little bit. So then that way, you know that it's non-refundable. You're seriously committed if you give $50. We felt like anything less than that wouldn't hurt enough, so then we still might lose you. Okay, so this is why we came to the conclusion of that amount of money. So if you take $200 for the one trip and you subtract your deposit, you have $150 left. Well, for this particular trip, we're not going to allow you to give us that $150. You're going to have to support raise for that $150. If you're going on 2 trips, the cost is $300. You get a discount on each trip for going on 2. So you subtract $50, you end up with $250. Does that make sense? So we have that we're going to send this graphic to you guys, and you'll have it so that you can understand kind of what you have to do. And so this graphic is for the people who are going on either the India trip or the Arab World trip. And in that case, you have to raise $150. Does that make sense? So all of these represent passports. And so this is how we're encouraging you to raise the support. We wanted the support raising process to be as much like real life as possible. So I know that many of you guys could just go to grandma and she'd give you the $150. We're not going to allow you to do that because we want it to be for real. We want you to experience what it's really like, and support raising is hard. When you go to be a missionary someday and you are going to go overseas, you're going to have to be raising thousands of dollars a month to support you and your family to be there. Okay? And so it takes literally on our team, we have dozens of people on our team, well over 100, probably 125 or 150 people on our team in order to allow us just to be at UT. And the budget for people who go on overseas is much larger than ours is. So you're talking about 150 or 200 people that it'll take for you to raise a budget to be an actual missionary. So we want you to get as much of what that experience is like as possible. So the way that we figured out to do that is you have to find supporters who will give you this amount of money or the equivalent. So 1 at 50, 1 at 25, 6 at 10, 3 at 5, okay? So it was broken down this way, and the amounts are so small because you don't have to raise that much money. And we didn't want you to get it all in one place. But let's say you call grandma, and she says, I want to give you $150. You don't have to tell grandma no. You can say, okay, that's great. We'd love for you to give and be a part of the trip, because when we do these trips, we support raise as a collective group. We're a team. And so you can take the $150 from Grandma if you feel good about doing it, but you have to count it as your $50 one or your $25 one. You can't count it for the entire $150 of the trip. Does that make sense? This is basically to make you have to get at least 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people to partner with you to go on Virtual Project. Does that make sense? Everyone with me? Everyone understand the heart behind it? Okay, so the second graphic looks like this, which we'll also send to you guys. This is if you're going on both trips. You have $250 to raise. So then you should get 2 people to support you at $50, 3 for $25, 6 for $10, 3 for $5, and then you would be to the amount of money that you have to raise. And the same principle applies. If they want to give more, you can allow them to give more. You can also say, hey, Grandma, you don't have to give more. I'm just looking for someone to give $50. That's okay too. But if you end up raising more, we're just going to mostly give the money away. So basically the money that you're raising is going to go for the Airbnb that we're staying in, the food that we're eating, the gas that it takes to get there, the different experiences that we're going to have, which are going to be a lot of cultural experiences, a lot of going out to eat, to go to like Arab restaurants and Indian restaurants so you can get the legit feel of what the food would be like there, interacting with those types of people, hopefully trying to build some relationships with them. But it's also going to go, and this is important, I want you guys to understand this part. It's also going to go to fund long-term workers. And so basically what we're trying to do is two-part. One is we want to be able to give away the equivalent of however it ends up being a year from now will be how it is a year from now. But what we're trying to do is give the equivalent of $1,000 to 3 different people that go on this trip to scholarship them to go on what's called like an internship or a medium-term trip next summer with one of these Live Dead teams overseas. And so let me give you an example. Let's say Laura Lee goes on the trip. She falls in love with India. God's drawing her to India. Well, we would send her on a short-term 6-week intensive trip to India so that she could see, okay, God, where are you actually leading me here? Where are you leading me to? What team would you want me to go with? We'll send her on a 6-week intensive actually to the country on the ground with people that we know and love, or with people that are known by people that we know and love. Does that make sense? And then we will basically as a community give her 1,000 of her budget to go on that trip. That's going to come from money raised for these trips. So basically we're trying to cast vision for the long term now, for you guys to see that this virtual project is about the long term. It's about getting long-term workers on the ground overseas, or raise awareness in your heart, because maybe eventually you just give to the work long term. Maybe you gain a heart for Indians and you reaching them in some metropolitan area that you live in someday. There's multiple goals, but one of the goals that's coming out of it is we want long-term workers to go, and we want to help finance them. So some of the money from this will also go to that. So we're going to try to give away $3,000 scholarships that'll be applied for next year for anyone who from this trip they decide to go on a short-term intensive internship overseas. Does that make sense? So basically $3,000 of the dollars that you guys are going to come and raise is going to go just for that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take another, let me think, do the math in my head. 300 times 4 is 1,200, times 4 is 4,800. We're going to take another $4,800 and we're going to support two families of missionaries in India and 2 families of missionaries in the Arab world from our trip for 4 years, $25 a month for 4 years. So basically what that equates to is $1,200 per family, but it's going to be divided over 4 years. So we're going to partner with 4 different missionary families in the places that we're virtually going to. Does that make sense? So basically what I just said is we're going to give away about $8,000. Well, if you guys do the math, we're going to basically give away all the money you guys are going to raise. So what I'm telling you is all this money is going to go to all of these things, but actually you're getting like $1,000 per person value on raising $150 or $300. And the reason that we're able to do that is because we had so much money raised for Project last year that didn't get put to use that we're going to put to use for this trip. Does that make sense to everyone? Cool. So we need you guys to raise the funds because really a lot of it's going to be given away. So I said all that to say, if you raise more than what you have to raise, that's not a bad thing. We're likely going to just give it so Jesus can be made known. We're not going to just collect it. We're not like a for-profit organization. We're not a bank. We're trying to see the gospel spread here, there, and everywhere. That we're not trying to collect your money and I'm not going to buy new sneakers with it. We want to see Jesus made known everywhere. And so that's what we're going to do with the money, is we're going to invest it in Jesus being made known here, there, and everywhere. Make sense? So that's the heart behind it. That's the amounts. We're going to give these graphics to you guys so that you can use them. Don't share these graphics. With that said, you can't raise money on social media. You can't use Facebook. You can't use GoFundMe. No social media campaigns can happen. So this graphic isn't going to be seen by anyone but you guys. It's just for your personal, hey, I got a $50 supporter today. I can mark it up on my iPhone and put an X over it. And I know that I'm this much closer to the goal. Everyone with me? I was going to say if I'm getting there later. So I think I am. I'm going to come back to it. So this is the graphic. As you're raising support, this is what it's going to look like, and then I'm going to answer the question. Mostly what we do is we send letters, and then we follow up with those letters with phone calls, and then there's either an ask that's done in the phone call, or we set up meetings where we just have a one-on-one conversation in person. For the sake of this trip, we don't have enough time to do that anymore, so we're going to skip the letter phase. So basically, you're going to either send a message, Facebook message, text message, whatever it has to be, without giving away too much information. Everyone say, I'm not going to give away too much information. I don't want to be told yes or no through a text message. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to send a text or a Facebook message and say, hey, I'm going on this awesome trip. There's a way that you can be a part of it. Can I give you a call sometime? Something that simple. You're not asking for it in the message. You're letting them know that you're going to call them and ask them for something later. All the asks need to happen on the phone, not through message. It's way too easy to say no in a message, and you don't get to cast vision for the trip and the need through a message. But you can do it on a phone call. So you're trying to keep the message that you send as simple as you possibly can to get to the phone call. Find out when they're free, call them when they're free. Don't just call them one time. Call them until they answer the phone. People are busy. I get phone calls all the time that I don't return. It's not because I don't want to talk to the person on the other side. I just forget. I'm busy. We're busy. We have lives that are going on. They don't want to not talk to you. They're not avoiding you. That's what your mind's going to tell you, but it's not the truth. They do want to talk to you. They're just busy. You're calling and they're trying to wipe a baby's butt, and they're like, I'll call them back later. They forget. They don't hate you. It's your aunt. You know what I'm saying? The enemy tries to get in your head and tell you, oh, they're not for you. They don't want to hear about what you have going on. That's not true. People are just busy. Just call them again. Leave a loving voicemail again. Okay? So what we're going to do is send messages, follow up with phone calls. If you can meet people in person, that's the best case scenario. If you can't, then set up an intentional phone call and cast vision for the trip. Don't call your grandmother and say, hey, Grandma, I'm going on this cool trip with this new campus ministry that I'm a part of, and I need one person to give me $50. You've missed the entire point of why we are support raising. Does that make sense? So you're going to be communicating the vision of the trip. This is it. I'm a part of this community called Chi Alpha on my campus, and it rocks. The people that I'm around really love Jesus, and I've grown to really love Jesus more than I ever have in my life, and I want people all over the world to also know Jesus, and so they're offering this trip this summer where I can go to Atlanta, and virtually by going to Atlanta, I can actually go to India. And Grandma, what I've learned is there's a lot of people who don't know Jesus in India. And I'm considering maybe being a missionary there someday, or somewhere like that someday among lost people. Or I want my heart to grow for India. I'm giving you two different scenarios. One is I'm considering maybe doing this with my life. One is I really want my heart to grow for the lost because Jesus loves the lost, and so I want to go on this trip. And a part of that is understanding how the missionaries live their lives. And so, Grandma, part of the way that missionaries live their lives is that they have to raise financial support in order to go. And so my leadership is also asking me to raise support to go on this trip so I can feel what it's like to be a missionary. Does that make sense? And then you say, this is what we're going to be doing on the trip. As they're like, oh, well, tell me more. Well, we're going to be doing all sorts of cultural experiences where we go to Indian markets and we go into Hindu temples, and maybe we get to go worship with Indian believers or Iraqi believers, depending on which trip you're going to. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking on Zoom with missionaries that are from there, and they're going to be telling us about how they reach the lost there and encouraging us to consider doing it with our lives. And so then you're casting vision for what we're actually going to be doing on the trip. Does that make sense? And then you say, would you partner with me for $50 a month? For $50 a month. I'm so used to saying that. Would you partner with me for $50 to go on this trip? So, also, the reason that we're giving you these graphics is because we want you guys to ask for specific amounts, because this is a big part about the life of being a missionary. If you leave it up in the air, what you find is you usually get like between $20 and $35. But if I'll ask and say, hey, Jared, would you consider supporting me for $200 a month? The majority of the time, we get what we ask for, or we definitely get a lot more than they would have gave as a default, without asking for a specific amount. And so we want you guys to experience what that's like, because it's very hard to ask someone for a specific amount of money. It's very easy to leave it up in the air and let them just decide. But what you'll find is if you let them just decide, they have no idea of what, I'm talking about real life missionaries, not this trip, okay? What we find is they have no idea of what's normal to give. They have no idea of how massive the budget is. If they did, they would give more. Does that make sense? So we want you guys to have as much of that experience as you can too. So, eventually you're going to be calling your buddy from high school and casting vision for the trip, and this is what we're going to be doing, and I love Jesus now. I know I used to get drunk with you on the weekends, but would you support me to go on this trip? You know what I'm saying? For $5. And he's going to be like, yeah. And your buddy from high school who's still not following Jesus just got to be a part of the gospel being made known in Atlanta, and then also potentially you getting called to go into all the world, and then all of a sudden they're tied into this whole crazy process of Jesus wrecking your life and then through you wrecking other people's life. How awesome is that? So I think that it's really awesome that some of the amounts are small this go around, because I think that you can reach out to people. Anyone can give. That's what I'm saying. Anyone can give to send you on Virtual Project. There's no one that'll say no because I just can't spare $5. It's going to be very rare. So think strategically of who you reach out to, who you let be a part of this process with you, So communicate the vision for the trip. Send a message. Do the ask in a phone call. Ask for a specific amount. And we don't do it via social media. Really, the heart behind that is no vision is cast well over social media. Basically, you're just trying to... I've put the coolest things out on social media, the hardest and the greatest of truths, and got like 12 likes. Because no one's coming there for that. You know what I'm saying? They want the cat memes or whatever. Brandon does. No genuine vision is cast well through social media, for the most part. I can't say it never happens, but it doesn't happen as well as you sitting down and just talking with someone, heart to heart. And you cannot possibly convey your heart for the nations through a Facebook post with a picture. And also, it just seems like you're asking for money, and that's not what we're doing. Honestly, we could just fund the trip. We don't need it. So everyone go into this just feeling like relieved. And also, God could provide through a shekel out of a fish's mouth. You don't need the person on the other side of the phone call. God's going to provide through someone. It may not be them. So it's not about money. It's about partnership. It's about doing it together for the sake of the gospel. It's about letting people be a part of the process of Jesus being made known, which is freaking awesome. So social media makes it seem like, hey, I need money. You don't need money. You do, but you don't. It's kind of like this weird dynamic. I understand that. But that's not the sole focus. The focus is casting vision for what God's doing globally, and they get to be a part of it. And it's so hard to convey that through a Facebook post. And it's so easy to say no to. If I see Song's post, I'm just going to keep scrolling. If Song, as my brother, calls me on the phone and he says, I need you, then that's a whole nother ball game. Does that make sense? On social media, I feel like, well, the other 10,000 friends that he has are going to take care of him. But if he calls me, I feel like he wants me to be a part of it. It's personal. So those are just some of the reasons that we don't do it via social media. Let's see if I miss anything. Yeah, I said all those things. So a big part of this is the first practical thing. This is what you're going to be following, just kind of this template. This is how you know that you reach the support that you're trying to get to. If you end up over that amount, fantastic. We're going to give it away to missionaries, and they're going to change the world. And so it's a worthwhile investment. And so next practically is you need to do basically a brainstorming, or maybe some people call it name storming, but it's basically you need to come up with a list of like 50 names of people that you could contact. Because along the way, you might find people that say no. That may tell you no. You may struggle to get the 2 people to give you $50, depending on the background that you come from. So you need a list of names before you even start. I would encourage you to start with some people that you think are going to say yes, either because they really love you, or they have a heart for the nations, or they love Jesus, because you want to start with some encouragement. You want to start on a positive note. You don't want to start with 12 no's. So likely don't start by reaching out to all of your, lost friends or people that are just like way out there and care nothing about God. Probably not the place to start. It's not going to be very encouraging. Start with your grandmother, who wakes up every morning and prays for you. Start in that place. Grandma's going to tell you yes. Send her a message. Call her on the phone. Cast the vision well. Don't treat her different just because she's grandma. This is one of the biggest mistakes I made when I started support raising, which is for some of you guys that are going to be doing this soon with your lives, is I didn't take the time to cast vision well to my parents. I just assumed they would give, so that was enough. Man, that was such a weak way to start the process. I should have took it like I was going to take it with everyone else, because that's the easiest ask that I ever had. So it was an opportunity to practice the process, to practice casting vision. Because even if I messed up at the end of it, I knew Dad was going to say, where do I sign up? So start in those encouraging places, build rapport, build your ability to cast vision for the trip, and then reach out to your high school teacher that you haven't talked to in a year or 2 years. Then you have some encouragement under you, a few yeses under you, and a few practices under you. So name storm, make a big list. This is where you start. Begin to work down that list. I already talked about that. So secondarily through the process, after you raise your funds or while you're raising your funds, the goal is that you also secondarily come up with a team of people who will be praying for us and for you during this trip. So I also encourage you guys to find 5 to 10 people that you do this same process with, but at the end, you don't ask them for money. You ask them to pray for you. Hey, please be praying for us as we're on this trip and we're trying to meet random people in Atlanta that we don't know and share Jesus with them. Because I'm believing people are going to come to know Jesus because of this trip. That we're not going to just go waste our time in Atlanta, but that we're going to utilize our time to actually meet people and pray with them and meet them where they're at and spend time with them and see what comes of it. And so ask them to be praying for us. Ask them to be praying that we stay healthy. Ask them to be praying that no one gets COVID and has to miss out on the trip. Ask them to be praying that no one gets COVID during the trip. Ask them to be praying for us and for the trip and for you, and that God would show you what he wants to show you through the trip. So 5 to 10 people who join that team. And through it, okay, and then finally what you're going to do is when the trip's over, you're going to all write letters to everyone who supported you or prayed for you, and then you're going to send them out. And you're going to say thanks, and you're going to tell them what you learned and what stuck out to you and what God did in your life and the experiences that you had. So you're going to be grateful for their investment of either finances or prayer, And then you're going to share with them why the trip mattered, why it mattered for you, why it mattered for your friends. What did you learn? Where did you go? What did you see? How's your heart changed because of it? And then they're going to get that letter and be like, man, that $5 is worth it. Man, that $50 is worth it. Look at what happened in Leah's life. So then what you've actually done is advocate for missionaries long term. So even if it's not you, now what you've done is you've created belief in these people that this actually works and it's valuable. So when someone else reaches out to them and asks them to be a part of sending them on mission in some particular way, they're like, yeah, I remember that time that I did this for Jess, and I remember the letter that I got and the difference that it made. And so then what we're actually doing, the more we do this year by year, is we're creating dozens and dozens of people who want to give to see the gospel be shared here, there, and everywhere. But if you just take their money and run, then the next time you come back, they're going to say, I remember that one. They called me, and I told them I'd give them $100 for the trip, and I did, and I haven't heard from them since. And they're back for $100 again. Does that make sense? Don't do that. That's such a dishonoring way to treat people. Like, let them be a part of the full picture. Who knows what God will do in their life through the trip? Maybe the whole purpose of you going on this trip is that someone that you contact to be on your team starts to question again, maybe this Jesus is for real. Maybe this Jesus is worth following. And that would be an incredible outcome. But if you do this part dishonorably, you may hinder that happening. So honor them throughout the process. Send a letter. Tell them thank you. Let them know what God did. And as you guys sign up and apply, you'll be also, the last, I think, practical thing, is you'll be assigned, a support raising coach. Normally, we walk with you through this huge process of raising like $4,500. And there's a ton of bonding that happens through it. But this year, basically, we're just going to hold you accountable. Are you sending messages? Are you making phone calls? Where are you at with support? Because you guys have until, April 30th to get to the full amount. April 30th. So, that's basically a month. You could do this easily in a week. So, but don't procrastinate just because you think you can do it in a week. If you can do it in just a week, get it over with. Then you don't have to do it when it gets almost time for finals. Like, you can do this next week. Don't wait till finals and then tell us you're freaking out and you don't think you're going to go on the trip anymore because you haven't raised any of the money. That's why we did the support training tonight. You have plenty of time. Don't let that be your excuse to not go. So you have till April 30th to raise the money. You'll have a coach who's following up, basically asking, are you sending messages? How many? Are you making phone calls? How many? How much money has been, sent in or raised? How much money has been sent in to you guys? And then, and basically the money, whenever that happens, you'll have a spreadsheet. This is the simple version. You'll have a spreadsheet that you have shared with us, and it'll tell how much money's actually come in to us for you. And then you'll be able to see live as we get it, almost, a few days after we get it, you're going to see it popping up there, and it's going to say, you have $100. You have so much left to go. Does that make sense? Okay. So you'll have someone walking with you through the process. Your deposit and your application is due by April 11th. The full amount of money is due by April 30th. And this is the final concluding marks. This is what project's going to look like. This is usually like a several-hour meeting, so I've tried my best to get it down, and I almost have done it in an hour. So, this is what project's going to look like. One, I want you guys to be aware of this before you get into it, so you don't get into it and you're like, yo, he didn't tell me this, and now he's taking away my cell phone. So, this is what you should expect. You should expect to not know a lot about what's going on. You're not going to know the schedule. You will never have a schedule of what happens one day on this trip. It's very intentional that takes place. It's the exact same way that we would do it if you were going with us to Muscat, Oman this summer, or to, Delhi, India. You would not know what was going to happen every day. You would just wake up and you would do what it's asked of you all day long. And that's exactly what this trip's going to be like. Really, the heart behind it is one of the coolest things that comes from these trips is you guys learn to trust us. And you guys learn to trust God. And that you don't have to always be in control of your schedule. You don't have to always be in control of every moment. And what you'll learn is we have good in mind for you. So it helps you to be able to follow us. And it helps you to be able to follow God in the long term. And so what we always say is Project is an extension of an already existing discipleship relationship. So we're hoping that your trust in us will grow so that when we get back on campus in the fall, something has come from Project for us in our relationship. And if you, I promise, if you rely on me to take care of your food and where you will sleep and what we will do and that it's going to be an awesome day for 5 days this summer, you'll come back in the fall and you'll trust me so much more. Because you'll learn that you can trust me, that I'm not a fuddy-dud and I also want to have fun, that I also like to eat nice things. You know what I'm saying? And then there's this bond that's formed through it, but also you learn to give up control to God, that you don't have to always hold on so tight to your schedule every day in order for it to work out for your good. So you won't know a lot of what's going on. So there's that part. Secondly, there'll be a really low use of cell phones on the trip. So most of the time you won't have your phone or be using your phone if you're going to go on the trip. If that's a deal breaker for you, don't go on Project. I'm saying it to everyone now. Know that for those days you won't have your phone. If it's a deal breaker, don't go. There's another trip. There's another thing that you can go on or do. I promise that it's for your good. You don't need to be distracted by text messages and friends and Instagram and Facebook. The world can do without you for 5 days. If you will go and not be distracted, the heart behind it is not that I want to take away your fun or your phone. I'm not going to be texting them for you. The heart behind it is this. If you'll go and you'll just be with us and you'll just be with God for 5 days, your life will be changed. But if you go and you have your face stuck in whatever it is that your face would be stuck in your phone for 5 days, you're going to miss out on a lot of what God wants to do in you. And so the heart behind it is that you'll grow with each other and that you'll grow with God. And I tell you it from the up front because if you don't want to go, don't go. If you don't want to follow through on that expectation, don't. But it's for your good that it's there. Does that make sense? Okay. I already said that one. You will have very little and possibly no personal time on this trip. You're going to have a hard time escaping people. So you have to prepare your heart for that because I know that some of you, that's really hard for. It's hard for me. I need my time to escape people. I need to just be able to say, leave me alone. I need to be alone. I need to be in my room. But on Project, that's not going to be possible. You're not going to just like say, oh, I need to make a quick coffee run. We're going to do everything together all the time. So if we get coffee, we're going to get coffee together. If we get lunch, we're going to get lunch together. If we take a nap, we're going to take a nap together. But there's another rule on Project. We don't take naps, and so we probably won't be doing that. So Brooke might, but she's pregnant. Man, you're having trouble with that water bottle. Okay, so don't expect to have personal time. We're going to do everything together. We're going to eat every meal together. We're going to abide together every day. We're going to do the Zooms with the missionaries together. We're going to go to temples together. We're going to go to markets together. What? You will get to go to the bathroom alone. That will be your moment. It'll be in a hole that we've dug in the backyard. Yeah, only half kidding. And it will. On that note, the other thing I want to share with you guys, and I think I have just a few more, is that it'll be really challenging. It's going to be intentionally challenging. I don't want to give away too much, but just to give you, for instance, we will spend at least one day of one of the trips, if not every day, only showering, bathing in any form, brushing our teeth with bottled water alone. And it could possibly be the whole trip, but it will at least be one full day. So this is just one of the challenging things that we will be doing throughout the trip. And you will have to do it. You can't just be like, yo, I'm not showering today because I don't want to do the whole water bottle thing. It's the point of the trip. The missionaries in Iraq literally had, for I think a year at least before they got it where it was fixed, only took showers in bottled water every time they showered because the situation that they were in, they couldn't use their water. That's the type of area they were in order to share Jesus. And so what we're trying to simulate that experience for you so that you can feel what they feel for the sake of the gospel. It's not just because I want you to shower with bottled water. That'd be goofy. Okay, so there's going to be challenging things that happen. They're going to be such as what I just said. That's fine. You'll get out of it what you invest into it. Do you guys have any questions? Beautiful. She said, how do people give money? So, I'm going to process really quick. Here are the options. We don't want to lose money for people to give money. So the way that we do it is they need to either, if they want to get credit for their giving, as far as taxes go, they need to send a check. Emily will send the information about where to send the check and to a GroupMe. Probably the main GroupMe, probably tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. Eventually, we will make a GroupMe for those who have applied. If you haven't applied, you will not get into that GroupMe, so you will be missing out on information. Therefore, you need to apply. Okay? So, if they want to get credit, they need to give a check. That's just the easiest and best way to do it. If they don't care to get tax credit for their $5 or for their $25 or whatever it is, they can just Venmo me, they can Venmo you, they can Venmo Emily. Those are your three options. They can Venmo you, they can Venmo me, they can Venmo Emily. But as soon as the money is Venmoed to you, you need to Venmo the money to Emily. Don't keep the money in your account. Just for accountability purposes, we try not to do that. So as soon as cash is given to you or Venmo is given to you, it needs to be given like that day or the very next day to Emily, so that you're not just pocketing the money that they're giving you for some other purpose, because that's not cool, and it's not like Jesus. So those are the ways that you can give. You can give in cash to Emily. You cannot give cash to anyone else. Say, I will not give cash to anyone else. You can Venmo me, Emily, or you can Venmo, they can Venmo me. That doesn't even make sense. Let's just simplify it. They can Venmo you or Emily. I do not need to be Venmoed any money for this. So scratch that. Going back. They can Venmo you or Emily, and you Venmo money to Emily, or they can send a check. And she'll tell you how to send the check. No PayPal. We lose money on PayPal. That's the reason why. Yeah. Old people that don't have Venmo, she says they're going to send a check. Or give cash if you see them in person. She'll send an address to send the checks to, and she'll send instructions on how to write the check and where the check goes. And she'll send instructions to Venmo. There will be a message that goes out with all the instructions for giving. Any other questions? Here's your chance. About anything project related. Go for it. Yes. The last day to apply is the 11th. Because at some point we got to nail down where we're going to stay for certain. So we actually have a place reserved right now, but based on how many of you guys have applied, we're going to have to cancel it. Because we purchased it based on how many of you filled out the interest form, and not nearly as many people have filled out the actual application. Any other questions? Go for it. Talk louder. Yes. If they give more, one person can only count for one passport marked off. So how many ever passports there, you have to have that many people give. That keeps you support raising. That's how you are like a part of the process. That's the goal. Any other questions? No, grandma and grandpa can't be two separate gifts if they're married. It's just one. If you get down to the end and you haven't raised it, talk with us. We may make those sort of exceptions, but we're trying not to do that so that you'll have as many real experiences as possible with asking people. It's okay. Any other questions? Here's your moment. It's not silly. In Zambia, you can't say silly. Okay, Leah. Both trips are going to Atlanta, and we're gonna the plan's to stay in the same house. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, love you guys. Thanks for being here. Be free. Thanks for hanging out. If you come ask me a question.